Are you ready?
Yes, Acre.
Let's go.
This is the Just Like You and Me podcast. It may look a little different today. Brian, we realized he wasn't doing enough. And so now he's doing everything.
Brian is truly doing literally everything now. He's doing all the camera angles manually.
Yep, watch this. Ready? Guest.
Boom.
Us. Maine.
Look at that.
Absolutely magical.
Yep. Now
instead
of hitting space bar, he clicks one button.
Yeah, we're not doing it again. That's all you get. That's all you get. But our guest today, you might recognize him. If you're listening via Apple Podcast, you will not recognize him because you can't see him. But we have Symon Graham back here. Symon, it's a pleasure to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be back. It's been some time, actually. I don't know how long it's been since.
Was it last year?
Yeah. I guess you could say that.
I don't even remember. We've had so many podcasts up to this point. I can't remember. No, I think it was this year.
What number are you guys on now?
This is episode 35.
I think I was like 20, like
it was
mid to late 20s.
Yeah. But as some of you might know, you are now officially a Catholic.
I'm officially a Catholic.
How's that feel?
Well, I guess I'm brand new, right? I'm reborn, right? So I feel like a child, a baby. No, it feels good. It's been a long time coming, going through the RCIA program, stuff like that. That's I think a 7-month program. It still goes on after you become Catholic. I think it's called mystagogy or whatever it's called, which is interesting. Or like going into the mysteries of the faith, so that's pretty sweet. Good deep dive. The work is just beginning, I think a lot of people think that like when you get to confirmation and your baptism and stuff like that, it's like, okay, I made it. I'm Catholic now. Cool. That's it. I can just coast from here. But it's basically me just getting to the starting line rather than like, okay, I finished the race.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't understand that. I think I'm considered a neophyte now, right? That's my first year of being Catholic. So I don't know. It's exciting. A lot of things I need to deep dive into.
Do your research.
Yeah, do your research. Yeah, I have a lot of books. I've been gifted a lot of books, so I'm not a big reader. So that's my next challenge is trying to read as many books as I've been gifted and then some. I really want to be educated in my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like now that I've become Catholic, I have been, I wouldn't say challenged, but questioned a lot on why and what about Catholicism. So I definitely want to be armed to be able to defend my faith when it's appropriate, obviously. I don't want to just, sometimes it's better to just be rather than to be like, well, this is why. So,
100%. So I want to talk a little bit about the couple of weeks leading up to actually being baptized, confirmed, and entering the church.
Yeah.
I know spiritual warfare is huge, and it looks different for everybody. And I would just love to know, like, what your experience was, if any, and if you did have any comings with spiritual warfare, how you got around it and what it might have looked like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there definitely was. Start that off, but I would say it probably started in dreams. Your subconscious, where you're not fully able to defend yourself, is probably where you're most susceptible to be attacked, I would say, is your subconscious. Sometimes thoughts, but just like crazy dreams. There was a couple of nights my mother was asleep in the room over or whatever, and I was just hanging out, probably watching YouTube, not doing anything productive. And she like had some sort of, she must have had like a night terror or something like that, and she like blood curdling scream came from the other room. Freaked me out. About fell out of my chair. I got up and I like walked over to her door. I was like, you good? Like, what was that? She was like, oh, it was cool. It's just a nightmare. And I was like, well, what was it about? She was like, there was like this thing that looked like a person with like long arms and wings that was chasing me. I was like, oh, cool, demons, got it. Okay, all right, good night, Mom. She went back to bed. I instantly went in my room and grabbed my rosary and like sat down. I was like, okay, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I just sat there for the next 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, just praying as much as I possibly could. And then another night, same thing occurred again. She screamed, and I like looked over in the hallway, and the way my it's like a 2-story house, right? So you go upstairs to a landing up to another stairs where you're like by all the rooms and whatnot. And I looked into the hallway, and I swear on my life, some of my eyeballs playing tricks on me. I was wide awake, but it was like something probably only slightly bigger than a football, like shot out probably 3 feet off the ground from her room and went down the stairs. And I was like, I'm not liking this at all. So I, again, prayed some more. And again, both pretty much sleepless nights within a week's time span. Just freaked out, basically. Then my girlfriend came over, and my mom likes to go to bed early, so she was over for a while. And so my mom was going to bed, and my dog, big old Doberman, huge dog, stood in my mom's doorway to her room and was just barking at her. And he's never done that before. And he wouldn't go in her room. And we were like, why is he barking? And she was like, I have no idea. So me and Peyton, my girlfriend, sat there and held each other's hands, put our foreheads together, just started praying. And as soon as we got done with the prayer, the dog stopped barking. And I was like, okay, cool. So that's how these next 2 weeks are gonna go. So I just started praying heavily over the sanctification and protection over the house and the rooms and the people in it and stuff like that. So that was some of the more physical aspects of the attacks, I guess, spiritual warfare. But a lot of it just came down to it was hard to sleep, or I was having bad dreams, or I was sleeping but I would wake up and not feel like I was rested, or like I actually entered into REM cycle or anything like that. So just attacking things that you wouldn't really notice that affect your day to day until it starts to add up. Obviously a lack of sleep does. So I just started seeing more irritability and just general fatigue and tiredness coming from these times, which was making it difficult to just exist. Not necessarily. There was never a question of whether or not I was going to go through with becoming Catholic or not. So there was no success on the spiritual warfare aspect of that, if that was the goal. Who knows what the goal is, but. It was just mostly that. And Peyton, whenever you end up having her on, she could probably talk about the stuff that she was struggling with before we got to that final day, and even on the day, just sitting in the pew, waiting for everything to happen, all the tension building up. I was like, I'm going to get sick. I'm so anxious and nervous. And then when everything started, it all went away. But yeah, it was intense in some moments. Other moments it was nothing to note. But yeah.
Was that the first time you've ever experienced anything like that?
Probably not. There probably was no, or I wasn't able to put together a reason why I might be experiencing spiritual warfare in my past, or had have chalked it up to something like that. And these incidents, like we said, took place in the 2 weeks before I was going to do something that, entering into the kingdom of God, being reborn and all that kind of stuff, being baptized. So it was I know why I'm being attacked now, versus, when I was younger, things happening, they were more so random rather than purposeful, or at least me being to identify them being purposeful or what they're purposeful for. So that was interesting for sure. I didn't, every Catholic was like, you got a couple more weeks left. Awesome. Be careful. And I was like, oh, wait, why? And it was just like, because you're about to experience some spiritual warfare. Even in the last 24 hours, they were like, it might get intense. I was like, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. Wasn't it Padre Pio that would just get beat up by the devil?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also St. John Vianney too, because he would he was known for doing like super long confessions.
Yeah.
He was a priest, obviously. He was a confessor to a lot of people, but he would just go on like rounds of like 18 hours, where he was just doing confession after confession after confession. And I think he wrote in his memoirs that like the entire time, I think he was just being attacked.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because I mean, you think about it, like you're hearing all these people's sins and stuff like that, and like they're putting those crosses onto you to some extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's your job as a priest to be able to like take it in and handle it as Jesus did.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to do.
100%.
But I mean, for you, like it's like there is a similar aspect of what you're about to handle, right? Because you're about to go through the sacrament of baptism, which is a complete wipe of everything that has ever been done in your life, right?
Yeah.
And so the devil obviously would want to destroy that chance as much as he, not humanly could, but just spiritually and physically in some aspect, right? Because it's a complete wipe off your slate.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I always like would question, why does it happen? Like, why does God allow the devil to mess with us, especially when we're sleeping? Because we're vulnerable. You're asleep. You can't defend yourself. And you just get tired, and it gets rough. And the only thought that I have is, because I've struggled a lot with spiritual warfare. I've told a good amount of stories here about it. At some point, I'll probably dive deeper. But whenever that happens, what do we always run back to? Is prayer. We run back to God. It's kind of like a check. It's like you kind of easy to get lukewarm and get normal back into your day. And then you see something or something and it happens, you recognize, and you're like, I need to pray.
Yeah.
I need to go back to God.
It's probably very like faith-based, like, is my faith strong right now? And when it starts to lack, when your defenses get low or, get tired, that's when it's able to creep in, seep in. When you have the shield up and you have the armor of God on, you're fine. No weapon formed against you is going to hurt you. But when you take off the armor or whatever, you don't adorn the full suit, whatever you want to say. You leave gaps, you leave holes. So like I said, when I started praying in those moments, the stuff stopped happening. So if I would have been praying beforehand, maybe it just never would have happened. If I would have adorned the armor and stayed consistent with it, some discipline in your faith, it would probably push off a lot of that stuff, prevent it from ever even happening. So
we talk about it many times on the podcast now. Like, when you spend time in prayer throughout the whole day, like, the devil has no time to jump in and do anything to you, because you're praying. You're with God. The second when you forget and you're not with God, that's when the devil kind of sneaks in there. He's like, boom, I'm here, and it kind of puts you in check. And it's really, I mean, we all have like the thoughts of just like, it would be easier if you stopped and just gave up. But that's just not what you need to do.
Right. I heard someone say one time that the devil has a budget, right? So when you pray to God and you put yourself in that continual state of grace, you're going to confession, you're receiving communion, you're doing all these sacraments and stuff like that, you become a more expensive target for the devil, right? And so his attacks have to be a little bit more centralized, because he can't, in a certain way, he can't do them as much, right? Because you're not putting yourself constantly in a state of sin. You're an easy target. And so when he does hit you, he's going to hit you hard, because he has to spend like the full amount of what he can actually do, because there's no other way to get you, right? And so those are the people that are at the top of like the grace chain. They're the ones who experience the hardest spiritual attacks, because the devil naturally hits them harder, right? But he doesn't hit them like you said, the devil has a budget. He can't always hit you. And so it's like you're in the desert, right? And God allows you to kind of be in that area, because he, in a certain way, wants to see how you respond to what will happen if you're faced with these types of situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you go back to? Do you go back to your bad habits, your old ways, or do you continue on the good path to the light, to the Father who wants to embrace you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Have you learned your lesson?
Right, exactly.
Especially it being like during Lent, so it's the perfect, example. But yeah. And then speaking of the saints, so my confirmation saint, which I surprised Father Valenchek with it. During the rehearsal, he was like going down the line, making sure he had everybody's, confirmation saint. You're whoever, you're whoever, you're whoever. And he gets to me and he like pauses and he gets like the furrowed brow and he like starts looking at his paper like he's all confused. I'm like, yes, that is the correct name. And he was like, Catherine, sweet, Saint Catherine of Bologna. So he was just surprised that I took on a female like saint as my patron saint. But reading her stuff, so she's the patron saint of painting and temptation. And so I have like a little booklet that was given to me by one of the instructors at RCIA, Steve. It's about St. Catherine, and I was reading some of the stuff. I was like, well, why is she the patron saint of temptation? What must she have gone through for her to become the patron saint of temptation? And I read it, and I was like, yeah, no, I got it easy. There was points where Christ would appear to her on the cross, but it wasn't Christ. It was the devil pretending to be Christ on the cross, and he was just like bashing her. And then he also appeared to her as Mother Mary and like bashed her. And he also took away her feeling of Christ from the Eucharist. So she couldn't feel the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Obviously, she knew he was present, but he just like an illusion, he didn't actually take away Christ from the Eucharist. He just made her think that like, I'm not feeling Christ in this moment. It has become mundane. But for her to, I couldn't imagine seeing Christ on the cross in front of me and just being like, you're horrible, you are doing bad things, you're doing all this kind of stuff, like what would anybody do in that sort of situation? Mother Mary and Christ appear to you and are just basically like, you're doing bad, you're a bad person. I would be like, yeah, you're right. Sorry, God. But it wasn't, obviously. So obviously he, didn't win her over. And eventually it's interesting too, because you kind of get to see reading her story through these trials and tribulations, kind of like the book of Job. She was eventually like, I don't know if I want to word it as rewarded, but for lack of a better term, she was rewarded for enduring and suffering these temptations, and was gifted all types of visions. Mother Mary appeared to her and let her hold Christ as a child, and a couple of other things. And she's also, what do they call it when their bodies don't
incorruptible.
Decay? Yeah, she's an incorruptible. So they have her in like this giant glass box in her nun clothes, and she's holding a rosary, and she's sitting in a chair without support, able to just sit up straight in the chair. And it looks wild. It's a very interesting. A lot of people see that and be like, "You guys are crazy," but we're just like, "That's amazing."
Yeah,
but it's interesting to read her story among other saint like stories and stuff like that. So,
you mentioned Mother Mary, and you obviously have a rosary on your mic.
I do.
And I would love to talk about how powerful Mother Mary is during those times of spiritual attack. Like, I had an experience 2 weeks ago. At the same time, I think I couldn't sleep. Immense fear. You just like know the devil's there, and you just know. It's a weird thing. I just feel like it's just looking. It's just there. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And it was actually I was with my wife. We're at a cabin down in Amish country in central Ohio, and go to sleep. We didn't. Nothing's coincidence, but I guess we left they had a fireplace on that had like a timer, right? So I lay in bed, so I'm about to fall asleep. I already had that fear, and I was able to like finally push through and get about to close my eyes. Close my eyes. Immediately, it burst on. So fire, whooshing sound, and it just looked like the gates of hell opened up. Scared the crap out of both
You're in a
of us.
cabin, like a wood cabin?
It was like a little cottage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then I went and I turned it off, and I'm like, all right, it's about to go down. Like, it's going to be one of those nights.
Sounds like one of those horror movies. Like, oh, we go down to the Amish. It's like an Amish horror movie. It's like the Amish are outside the house with the
It's like,
no reception.
Turn on the flames.
Flame on.
That's
I think it's a fantastic horror. But so that happens, and I just know that it's going to be one of those nights.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to just pray through it a little bit and just go to sleep. Just ignore it. Devil holds no power over me.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Couldn't sleep. Every time I get close, creak, something just really loud that woke me up.
Yeah. Hypersensitive.
Yeah, just goes nuts. And then so I'm like, I'm going to pray the rosary. So I on my phone, I was playing like a old rosary loop.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think it was like 2 hours long. I played it 6 times all through the night. Then I think it was like probably around 3, 4 in the morning. I was able to like close my eyes and about to fall asleep again, and like sleep paralysis type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's not a true sleep paralysis, because it's like someone strangling me from on top. That's what it feels like.
Oh,
right, strangling me. And then I realize the rosary's praying, so I just relax and just start the Hail Mary. Immediately gone. And then the thing that really scared me and creeped me out was I felt pain in the back of my neck. Okay, like right here.
mm-hmm.
And if you look at images of the Virgin Mary, that's where she's stepping on the devil. Father, who was the guy that brought the St. Jude relic to our church? Father Martin something.
Oh,
I forget his name. Someone will fact check us.
exorcist.
He's an exorcist.
Yeah.
So he talks about people get that pain because that's where Mother Mary's there stepping on the devil's neck. And that did not comfort me. It comforted me, but also didn't at the same time.
Yeah.
But the second you're able to pray the rosary, the devil's just gone. We talked about the Ted Bundy story too. Mary's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a beautiful, the rosary is such a beautiful weapon.
Oh, there's the Ted Bundy story where he couldn't enter the room.
He was thrown out.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I forget where I saw it, but I saw like a specific way to wear the rosary, which is like around the belt loop, and then it like hooks down and then goes in your pocket, But the symbolism about it is like, that's like where you would have a sword at, that's where you would keep your sheath at for your sword. And the idea is that like this is your weapon that you keep on you. And I know Padre Pio, I believe, is a huge advocate of praying the rosary to fight the devil and stuff like that. So I pretty much go nowhere without the rosary. And like I could be about to be late and then realize I don't have it on me. I'm running back in, grabbing Mary. Sorry. I'm not going anywhere without her. Without her in Christ, I'm not going anywhere, And that's not to say that I care about Mary more than Christ, for everybody out there that was like, well, see, look. But, so I'm not saying that. But, so she's definitely an important figure throughout all of the Bible and more. I went to the Cleveland Museum of Art yesterday. Me and Peyton were celebrating our 1-year anniversary. So we went there. We kind of did like a redo of our original date. So we went to the Museum of Art, and they have a bone of Saint Sebastian there, and a bunch of other relics there. Yeah, they have like
been there so many times. I had no idea. That they had a bone there.
Yeah,
dude, the amount of relics that they have there is actually insane.
They have a bunch.
It hurts me because those relics need to be in the church, and they're just. Yeah, people just like, oh, that.
That's cool. I'm totally okay with them having relics inside a museum.
Yeah.
I think if you want to put more and more relics out in public spaces, I think I'm actually okay with that thought, because it just means you're putting these like holy objects in different areas and stuff like that. Obviously within reason.
Yeah.
You don't put it inside like a club or something like that. But like, but if there's like a park or something like that, there was a relic, I think that would actually be a good idea. Just start doing that. Just get relics. Just start.
Yeah, I mean,
Johnny Appleseed style. Just go across the United States and just start spreading relics around everywhere.
Yeah, let me just go find a relic really quick.
I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to.
No, you're totally fine. But yeah, there's a bunch there. I noticed the Saint Sebastian one a while back because obviously I'm part of Saint Sebastian now. So I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like I saw this before I became like Catholic or came to Saint Sebastian. But the amount of like imagery they show with like Mary with a crown on, Mary standing on top of the moon, stepping on a snake, Mary like taking care of business basically, is like, oh, like this is very apparent that this was like, very cared about. And also like it's very, this is her role. Like one of her major roles is to just kick the crap out of the devil, which is fantastic. Strong female characters. Important.
She's the new Eve.
Yeah. And Christ is the new Adam. So it's just the amount of like religious artifacts or like I said, reliquaries are there, and art. It's fantastic. They have also 2 statues of Saint Sebastian there, which are pretty sweet. But the art there, like painting wise, is fantastic. But that just appeases my background as an artist. So
you're an artist?
Yeah. I don't know if you know that.
No, we didn't. I don't think we talked about it last podcast.
I think I mentioned it, but we kind of glazed past it or over it.
Well, let's glaze in it. Oh, that's the right phrasing. But
God.
Let's talk about a little bit of your background. Yeah, you're an artist.
Let's skip past what you just said and go on.
Let's just glaze over what he just said.
Yeah. Exactly, please. But so art. Let's see here. I mean, so I kind of picked it up when I was younger. My dad's an artist, Michael Graham. He was like, plug me if you talk about art, and I was like, man, I'll plug you. So he was a freelance artist for a long time. He did art, but had to stop it. There wasn't internet during the time that he was alive, so getting yourself out and around being an artist back then was a lot harder than it is nowadays. But now it's just oversaturated and everybody thinks they can do art, but that's a separate opinion. So I kind of like, back when I was like into like Pokemon and all that kind of stuff, I would draw my favorite Pokemon and all that kind of crap. And my dad thought it was good. It was decent enough. And we'd sit down and get a huge piece of paper and we'd just start drawing on the same thing together, giant battles and dragons and all that kind of stuff. So I had a knack for it. Went to middle school. They had an art program there. Didn't really participate in that too much. Went to high school and I got into the Firestone art department program there. And I didn't take it serious at all because I was just like, I'm a kid, who cares about my future? And then senior year comes around and I was like, oh crap, I got to do something after high school. And I wasn't ready to enter into the real world yet. So I was like, college is the next best step for me. And bless you. I didn't want to do, science or math or any of that kind of stuff. So I was like, well, I'm halfway decent in art, so I'll do that. So I ended up applying to a couple places, got in, but my ultimate pick was CIA, Cleveland Institute of Art. Very expensive place, very, it's nice. It's very nice. A lot of equipment, great stuff there. But I decided to commute because it's so expensive. So I'm commuting from Akron to Cleveland pretty much, 4 or 5 days out of the week. And when it would snow out, it took like 2 hours to get home. And if I needed to like rent out certain equipment and then I forgot one small thing to make the equipment work and I'm already home, then I had to drive all the way back up there. So that was a big old pain in the butt. But that's really when my art started to take off, was in college. Like I said, I didn't take it seriously in high school. I didn't care. So I started taking it more serious. Had a problem with, how would you say that politically correct? The people there were very not, I look like a unicorn there, right? So this is peak bodybuilding time, by the way. I'm getting ready to step on stage at this point. It's my first year in college. So I was ripped. I know I don't look it now, but I was ripped. And I was getting ready. So I was like meal prepping. I'm carrying meals around with me. I'm semi tan. I was working out all the time. I was ripped. I'm blonde haired, blue eyed, 6'3", walking around liberal arts college. And so, like I said, looked like a unicorn. And I got treated like a unicorn, which was interesting. So I kept very much to myself. But there was interesting courses that were, without knowing, I was kind of introduced into, like, the world of art and the, like, religious sense. So I didn't have to take, it's like a private art college. So I didn't have to take regular math, regular science, regular history. That got all wiped off my board, thankfully, because I'm not good at those. But I got to take art history. So I got to learn about churches, why churches were built in certain ways, all the art that was made back in that day, who made them, why they made them, when it wasn't appropriate to, like, make, like, art that was showing anything divine in nature. Other religious art as well, going over architecture, paintings, drawings, sculpture, pretty much everything you could think of, every medium you can think of. And so that was kind of my first, what would you call it? Exposure. Yeah, exposure to Catholic stuff before I was ever even godly, I would say. Because at that point, I probably believed in God, but, like, was like, yeah, he's there, you know. So I didn't really, like, care too much about it. Ended up leaving there at some point. Just couldn't do the money, the distance, or the people. They were, like, making, like, little clones, you know. I want to be my own person. They were like, in order to make it in this life, you have to do it just like this. And I was like, no. So I had left. Went to Akron U. I think 30 credits didn't transfer. So I had to restart everything from the beginning. So I had another 4 years. So technically I've been in college for 5 years at that. So I did all 4 years at Akron U, had to retake art history, which was fine. You know, I didn't do good in it because I suck at memorizing things. So it is what it is. But, you know, eventually it slowly helped push me in a direction I didn't know that I was going to end up going in, which was becoming Catholic. And I remember the first time we got to, I think, sophomore year. We got to decide what a theme of a spew of paintings we were going to do. So we were going to do 8 paintings, and we had to pick a theme. And we had to sit down with the art teacher individually and talk about, this is my theme, this is what we're doing. And I sat down with her, and I was like, yeah, I'm really into this kind of art. It's like illustration-based stuff, like comic books and stuff like that. I should probably say that as well. I wanted to go to college for illustration. I was going to CIA, sorry. CIA, all these different acronyms. So I went to CIA for illustration, didn't like it, went to Akron U. They didn't have illustration as a major, so I had to minor in it. I majored in drawing and painting. So I was going to combine the two, combining illustration and painting, fine arts. And there's a lot of conversations all over the world right now about how illustration is not considered a fine art. That's why it's separated. But there's comic book artists that I would swear up and down can outpaint and outdraw some of the best fine artists nowadays, but that's another tangent. So I was in the fine arts department, and I was like, yeah, I want to do, like, strong, like, masculine men in positions of power saving damsels in distress at a liberal arts school. And they were like, yeah, it was very brave. And even my teacher was like, yeah, I don't know how well that's going to go over. And I was like, why does it matter? She was like, I don't know. And I was like, okay. So instead of going that route at a liberal arts college, I went religious route. So I made it.
You don't like this? Watch this.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So I made, like, a slew of paintings that were religious based. I was like, you got to pick one or the other. So I'm not, pick your poison. So I made a bunch of religious paintings, which went over quite well. So that was fun. But yeah, so then I did the rest of my 4 years in college there, did an art show, experimented with drawing, painting, sculpture, photography, light and dark rooms, Photoshop, digital art, pastels, what else? Graphic design, all types of stuff like that. Right. Yeah, so I've learned a broad range of stuff, but I specified in drawing, painting, illustration.
So you said that kind of opened you up on your path towards the church because it gave you like your first exposure per se, right? But what do you think was actually in the art that you think really led you to start your path?
So
if it was just that thing, like if there was something in there that did eventually lead you to it,
for
what
sure.
would you say it would have been?
So there used to be, I mean, there still is now, it's just changed, but there was a hierarchy of the importance of like what you were painting, right? What you were capturing. And it was God first, King and Queen second, and then everything underneath it. And eventually that switched. But it was very interesting to see that, like, you got to see how much people really cared about Christ, really cared about God, really cared about the saints, the angels, Mary, all of this kind of stuff. And it made you think, like, what it must have been like during that time when there was probably almost nobody that you would run into that didn't believe in some manner, and so it made me curious on, were these people just medieval and dumb, and just believing in whatever somebody that was slightly intelligent threw at them because they couldn't even read, or was it, something different, something more? So it made me curious a lot of, like, why was this so important? And there's got to be a reason for it to be that important, especially for it to be above King and Queen, so that kind of like started the journey or the thought process, got the seed planted, So I thought that was interesting because it used to be everywhere and all the time. And nowadays you look at it as some guy with a canvas on a floor with a paint bucket on a string full of holes, and he's throwing it over the canvas and spinning it. And he's like, art. I'm like, cool. Anybody can do that. It's more about the idea now, which is fine. That's what abstraction is about. It's more about what your art represents rather than what it actually is at times, which is interesting. And I'll probably get a lot of flack for that.
We'll clip it. We'll make sure you do.
Yeah. Let them know that I think my dad... No, I don't out my dad like that. But, it's just strong opinions on it. I respect it. I took an abstract course because I wanted to learn about it. Not because I couldn't... I tried to sign up for an illustration class too late and had to take an abstract class. But, so I learned about it. And I respect it. And I understand it. And there's essence and little strands of abstraction, even back in when Caravaggio was painting, super realistic stuff. There's abstract, like, ideas in those paintings. So it's to disrespect and disregard a whole section of painting is to miss out on something that could inform and elevate your current work. So I'm not going to look at something that I may not truly enjoy at some times and disregard it for itself when I could learn something from that could push me in a better direction, basically.
Do you think that there's ever like a too far that modern art or abstract art can kind of go to? The example I'm thinking is there's two.
The banana
on the wall, and then also there's an art gallery, I don't know where it was, and some dude had a skateboard and just put it down and people taking pictures of it because they thought it was modern art.
I think I told you about that.
I think you probably did, yeah. Because we know what
the guy hitting butter. Yeah. Have you seen that? The guy just sitting on the floor, he's just smacking some butter.
Well, like about one of my favorite ones I saw actually maybe today. There was this huge, like when you make like vases and stuff, the clay stuff. It was huge. It was probably like 10 feet tall, and he was just like putting water on his face and just smacking it against the thing, and it was just spinning, and that was like the art.
Yeah.
So do you think there is a too far?
That's a good question. See, this is where we're getting into like dicey territory because there's a lot of art snobs that would try to rip me to pieces for, and like I said, I'm like art history was not my strong suit, so for me to have an opinion is rather trivial. But if it was too far, I don't know. It depends on what you mean by too far. People are willing to purchase, and see wacky things. That's why the circus was something that was big, So
it's why memes are big now.
Yeah, memes, and anybody can make anything into a meme. Like, so there's somebody who would look at somebody smashing their face into a clay column and think that was the most beautiful thing that they've ever seen, and a representation of whatever that hits their heart, and they're going to shed a tear. And then there's going to be somebody else that's going to record that and be like, listen to the sound this makes, and laugh about it. So it's not, it just really depends on what you mean by too far. Because like the banana on the wall, or the guy who just, can't carry his skateboard around his art museum, so he sets it down and people come over, start taking pictures of it. It's, when does the line become blurred? When does it become like art is a subjective opinion? Because, it pretty much is a subjective opinion. I had this conversation with Jack Franceschi at some point he was talking about how propaganda isn't art because it's bad. Like the message of it is bad, or something similar to that. Don't quote me, because I know Jack will be like, you misrepresented me. So I don't remember the full thing about what it was.
Soon. He can state his opinion.
Yeah, I'll just need to come in for 5 seconds so we can rehab that conversation, and I'll just dip out. But I don't know. I think art can be taken to a point where it's ridiculous, but maybe that is the point, is to be ridiculous.
That could be art.
Anything can be justified basically through art, because it doesn't have, that's what me and Jack are arguing about. It has to have some sort of absolute truth, and I thought that the absolute truth is that it has no absolute truth. It can be anything, because anybody can agree to it, but I guess an absolute doesn't pertain to one person's, perspective on it. It just, as a whole, this is what it is, regardless of what people think about it, which is kind of like what Christ says and how we as people take it nowadays.
Yeah.
But so I don't know, because who defines what art is at that point? Is there an absolute authority on what art is? And if we could discover what the absolute authority is on what art is, then you can start to compare things to that absolute and be like, well, it doesn't meet that, so this isn't considered art, therefore we're taking it too far. So I think it just depends. I don't think there is an authority on art. There's art judges, but that judge is going to think somebody's art is way better than somebody else's, and vice versa. So it's a hard question to answer. But there's plenty of art that I think probably a majority of people could look at and be like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess we always look at things in images, right? Mm-hmm. And images either speak to you or they don't.
Yeah.
The two things that I usually come back to, I didn't study art, but I did study literature, which has, I think, a lot of similarities to art in a certain sense. It is technically an art.
It is, yes.
There were two types of critical thought when it came to judging literature. The one was the Victorian criticisms, which were basically you would talk about something as it was, and you would try to basically just plainly state this is what something is, right? No sort of allegory, no metaphors, no symbolism and stuff like that. It's just very Victorian, just this is what this is. And then that kind of evolved into T.S. Eliot, who was a thinker in the 20th century, who basically said, no, what criticism should be is that, the artist has a responsibility to just basically put something out there. We need people to put stuff out there, to create stuff. And then it becomes the responsibility of the critiques, the people who view it, to make it into something better.
Right.
And that is, it seems to me that's kind of more the path that you go on in terms of criticism. Not necessarily criticism, but maybe just notation of when you see art, it's someone put this out here because they thought that it spoke to them in some sense. How do I make this maybe in a sense, maybe you don't think of that way. I don't know. What would you say to that?
I mean, yeah, I'm always willing to, even if, so like the banana on the wall, right? So even if I were to view the banana on the wall, I could sit there and muddle through as much thought as I wanted, and I could find something that I could either relate to or understand about the purpose of the banana on the wall, what it may represent, what it doesn't represent, what it's calling out, what it's not calling out, whatever. So, like, yes, like you could come to some sort of conclusion about the importance of this, and, nowadays, it's like everybody's feelings and how they think must be accepted. So you put this art out and you feel this type of way. If I say that this is, crap, and then all of a sudden I get canceled for it. So like,
right.
I don't know. But what you were talking about is very similar to Frank Stella. So he's an artist, right? And it went through a couple of other stages before it ever got to Frank Stella. But Frank Stella is somebody who started to just say that this is what this is. This is simply paint on canvas. It is nothing more than that. And he made a couple of particular pieces that were just called like the Black Series or the Black Pieces or whatever. And it was literally just consecutive squares getting slightly larger on a canvas that were all black with white lines just barely between it. But all it was is like, this is just paint on canvas. And that was the point of it. Because to be an artist is to be a master at manipulation and illusion. You're just looking at pigments on a piece of paper or canvas that I have put in a certain particular order that convinces you that what you're looking at is what I say it is. And you can, get other things from it, but overall, I said this is what this is. I painted this. This is a tree. You believe it's a tree because it looks like a tree. I have now just tricked you and manipulated you into thinking that these pigments put in this particular way is that. That's basically what art is, And then abstraction is like, okay, now that we've done hyper-realism, you slowly start to get away from that. So you start to look at stuff like Monet and Picasso, right? So the stuff that you see like Starry Night or the lily pads and stuff like that, it's not a super realistic rendition of those particular things, but it's enough for you to recognize them, So you start to put things together. You start to learn what those basic art elements are that you can trick somebody. It's just on the edge of being unrecognizable, but it's there enough for you to put together yourself. And then you go further and further and further and further. And you get to people like the Cubism movement, where I'm showing you one face, but it is every single side of that said object represented in one picture. And then you're like, I don't know what the heck I'm looking at. But it's whatever, people loved it. And a lot of it came down to nobody's ever done this before. And that's why it became so popular. Doesn't mean I like it, but nobody had ever done it before. They were pushing the bill, So that's a lot of the reason why it became so exciting to look at, or the emotion that this captured rather than this realistic depiction of something. This was far more emotional because your mind is like an abstraction of thoughts and feelings and stuff like that. So how can I show this to you without doing something super realistic? Because like with Dali, who did the dreams, and you see all these crazy weird imagery, and you look like you're looking into like a dream, obviously, but just like it's whacked out, and nobody had done that kind of surrealism before. I mean, people had done that before Dali, but Dali was like the surrealist. So I don't know. It just comes down to one, how good you are, how willing you are to push the bill, and a couple other things, I'm sure. But like nowadays, that's what people are doing. Everything has been done. So now you have to do stuff that nobody's done, and it becomes ridiculous because all the stuff that isn't ridiculous has been done.
It reminds me of a point that we talked about, or you mentioned on the podcast a while ago, was that internet trend where people were like putting stuff in barbecue sauce and like saying this is the first time ever an iPhone's been covered in barbecue sauce in a bucket of beans. Because like once you do something, you continue to push it farther.
Yeah.
But as you're talking about that, I'm thinking of like photography. Like, photography is like really cool. Like, we can capture an image of something. Yeah. And then it just became better and better, higher quality. Like it's hyper realistic. Now you're getting some artists that are taking photos of just random objects in a place that doesn't make sense. Kind of, it looks like AI. Yeah. Because how AI could just do crazy things. So it's kind of moving in that way, which is kind of interesting, because it is pushing the boundary in a way, and it is cool in its own little sense. That's why I struggle with art, because sometimes it can be really abstract, and I'm looking at it, and I want it to be like, that is a tree. Yeah. And then I'll look at something, I'm like, I don't know what that is. Yeah. Or the stuff that would bother me, though, is like when it's just like an all black canvas, and then there's just a paragraph of something, and it's like anybody can do that. Like that. Like I for art, I'm not an artist, not hardcore. I don't even care. They can come at me. I don't even care. For me, like what I like about art is like what I like about like all arts, writing, music, something that is so beautifully done that I know that I could never even attempt it. Yeah. Like that's where I'm like, that's insane. Yeah. Sculptures, all that stuff. It's like, wow. Yeah. Some abstract stuff. It's like, I can tape a banana on a wall. Yeah. Dude, I'll do a pineapple on the wall.
But has anybody done that before? No. Also, it comes down sometimes to the name of the artist. So if it's a super famous person, people will freak out that is a super famous person, and then they could tape a banana to the wall, and the person is such a fanatic about that famous artist that they produce their own, this is how this is so important, this artist is a genius. I mean, it's just like, no, I just did that because I knew you guys would do the work for me. Yeah. And it's like, okay. But
yeah, now that you mentioned Hunter Biden and his art, how do you feel about his art?
I haven't seen anything besides the cocaine stuff. So I kind of stopped there. But I haven't even checked out any of that crap. No. I'll let that stay where it's at.
Do we want to go into a little conspiracy theory, or want to continue on?
Oh, we can.
We have 10 hats on. Do we have them on?
Yeah, I always have a
I only have a coffee cup.
Yeah, a coffee cup. Well, we'll
just pour that out.
Pretend 10 hats on. What do you think about when people talk about how art's used for like money laundering and like selling and stuff?
Oh, for sure.
You think so?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Are you joking?
I've never looked into it. I just know that that's a conversation, and I'm sitting there in my head, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. Some of these pieces are going for multi-million dollars, and it's just paper.
Art collectors, why do you think they make, good art collectors, why do you think they make so much
money?
Yeah, or tax cuts, like this is a charity event, I'm paying for this, I can write this off, don't have to pay these kind of taxes.
And it's technically just an asset that you don't cash in anywhere, so it's not like an earned income.
Yeah, exactly. So they just use it to do that kind of stuff. That's why you see art get passed around like that so much.
You know what? We should make art.
Yeah.
So in the last video, or last podcast with Gina, which was 2 podcasts ago when this comes out, we said that if we got 10 likes, we would be verified on Instagram for a month. So we'll have a look at that. We'll give it a full week.
I don't know if we did.
And I haven't checked, but if we get 10 likes on this podcast, we will.
Come on, let's do this. Like we always get 10 likes.
Do we get 10 likes?
Yeah. Every time.
Let's go for
15.
No, let's go 20. I'll say something
20,
super
20.
controversial, so we can get a bunch of views. And then
20 likes on this, and
we'll do our own art, and then we'll do a giveaway.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Let's do a giveaway.
Do you want me to be there, or do you want me to just watch you guys make something?
Right here in the middle of the couch.
Yeah, and watch us paint it.
33 hosts.
I'll coach you guys.
Yeah, we'll do it.
One on each knee.
It'll be a fun little event. Painting's like painting's hard. Yeah. He's in it painting. It'll be for you. For us, we're just like monkeys. I don't know about you. I'm just not good.
No, I'm not.
Painting's difficult.
But it's really fun.
Someone can interpret my art in a weird way.
Yeah, you can just do anything with confidence.
Yeah. Well,
art with confidence.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, just to comment back to like the other conversation. It does seem to a certain extent that artists should have some sort of responsibility to basically ensure that their art should be taken in some sort of way. right? Like I feel that allowing your art to be just an ambiguous thing is almost almost a bad thing. You could almost say that it's evil, I think, to a certain extent. Because if you're letting it detract from any sort of purpose other than something that is good, it's meaningless and bad in a sort of way, right? Because it detracts from like what we should actually be viewing as people, right?
Okay.
Like, for example, we say this all the time. Someone has a drinking game where we bring it to this point. But I mean, like social media, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's so many things that detract your focus away from what your focus should probably be focused on, right? And to me, I think that bad art, bad music, bad movies, bad everything, right, is the same thing. It detracts from what should actually be viewed as a good movie, or what should be listened to in a good song, or perhaps what should be painted in a good painting, right? And like you said that you had a hard time kind of understanding, what is the ultimate image? Like we don't have like a true format for what we think should be a beautiful painting because everyone does seem to have some sort of subjective belief as to like what they find beautiful.
Right.
But there has to be some sort of form, right? Like there is something that is like characteristically beautiful. Like when people see a banana on the wall, no one talks like I have not seen anyone say that it was like a beautiful thing. Right? Like they all said it was a ridiculous thing. And that to me just like that just seems like a bad act. Like
I think you're 100% correct. And this is where I'll go with it. There is a standard. The world may not have one, but as Catholics we do. As Christians we do. So 100%. So yes, art can be for anything, but as Catholics, we need to be consuming stuff that is good, and anything that is not of God is bad and a distraction. Social media, movies, music. So that's actually I love that point.
It's good. Hard segue, but good segue.
Well, it's like how rap music can be super good, right? Like I listened to rap when I was in high school. I love Kendrick Lamar. To me, he's like one of the greatest rappers of all time.
We're like enemies right now.
Really?
Yeah, I'm on J. Cole.
Okay, he's okay. He's good too. I think he's
okay.
I don't think he knows that they're beefing right now.
They are.
No. Hey, I like J. Cole not as much as the next other person, but "Motivate" was a great song. I liked that one. But anyway, his music is not objectively good, right? Like he sings about very terrible things sometimes. I think some of his songs have an incredible message that a lot of people tend to overlook about what he's actually rapping about. It's incredibly deep. But for the most part, a lot of it's just bad.
Yeah. Bad as in the sense of like the message isn't something good to consume. Not necessarily that the music itself is
the idea of what he's trying to convey.
Right. So yes, I agree. But what if the question for you, I suppose, is like, what if the art's purpose is to be bad?
I think personally, I would say that that's a bad thing to do anyway. Like, for example, we talk about pornography, right? Pornography is a complete and utter, like, dismantlement of what love should actually be, right? You're trying to literally deconstruct something that is purely good for the purpose of making it look evil. And nowadays, it's gotten so construed to the point that people don't even realize that they're doing that anymore because it's just so overloaded with how many people are doing it.
Right.
But it came from that original point of, I'm going to rebel against this beautiful form of what love should actually look like.
Yeah.
And that's how I would look at bad art, or bad music, or bad movies. That would be what I would say.
Yeah. I don't know if it's possible for you, I mean, I'm sure it is, to push the art, music, movie, writing to the point where it is satirically bad. So the point of it being bad is so bad that it's bad, and it's making fun of other things that are bad. That's a lot of bad in one sentence.
Yeah.
But, like, so if I made something that is like what you're saying objectively about bad things, but I'm pushing it to the point where it is me calling out said bad things by making it satirical. What is that line?
I guess I would say, like, for example, I would look at The Hangover, right? The movie The Hangover,
Yeah.
which is objectively a hilarious movie.
Right.
Like, it's just hilarious. The stuff that happens in that movie is utter and completely wrong. Right. But the intentionality was never to make a movie that, like, is serious. Like, they're not telling people to do this, right? They're not doing it for, like, the purpose of making, like, thinking that everyone else is going to do it. They're just showing it's like a Greek comedy, right? You show someone's errors and where those errors ultimately lead them. Right, that's almost like a moral story to a certain extent, right? Like, if you drink too much in Las Vegas, this is what's going to happen. You're going to wake up with a tiger, right?
Yeah, Mike Tyson.
Yeah, but as we still have our tinfoil hats on.
Okay,
we never take them off. You can argue, I will argue, that there's people that they would present a movie like that it's like you could look, oh yeah, this could happen. It's funny, could not be bad, but then you can look deeper. Did they intentionally make it so where you can go, oh, you know, it's not that bad, but with the intention of desensitizing you to it?
We have talked about that too.
Yeah. That's what it's for. So I would argue that's still bad.
Right. Like, I mean, making, for example, like, you have to look at it as in comparisons, I would say. Right. Like, objectively speaking, and you have to answer this as a Catholic now.
Okay.
Which movie is better, The Hangover or The Passion?
Oh, The Passion.
Well, duh, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, what is the story of what The Passion is actually conveying as opposed to what the story of The Hangover is conveying, right? And so then you would ask yourself, well, why not just make another Passion? Like, why wouldn't you just make another movie that's of the similar idea, right? And that's where it starts to, I think it starts to get a little bit more grainy as to, like, okay, because I don't think that that's the case for what the point you're, but it's like, to a certain extent, I think you are right. I think people are doing it subconsciously. Like, we are desensitizing ourselves to these bad ideas. It started with the Naked Gun series. If you've ever seen those or Airplane.
Yeah.
Have you not seen those?
No.
What's his name? Leslie Nielsen?
Yeah.
Watch, that camera's on me. Watch the Naked Gun series. Hilarious. Terrible stuff that's, like, promoted, right?
Yeah.
But just absolutely hilarious stuff. I don't know.
Watch with caution.
Yeah, I think they're just.
Yeah.
I think there has to be some sort of balance.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to appropriately show that the bad things that are portrayed in your movie are bad.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, how can you tip the scale so hard that it full circles, right? So it's that can be different. It just depends. You'd have to be good at executing said thing whenever, if it's a movie, a painting, or a drawing, whatever. You know, so I definitely agree that there's a lot of things out there that are desensitizing you constantly. You know, like back in the day when you used to get on, like, I don't know if anybody remembers, like, Cool Math Games.
Oh, yeah.
That website, yeah. Like, you get on there and how many different advertisements would be on the left and the right. You try to get on any sort of like fun computer game that's on a website now, and some of those advertisements are super lewd. And it's like, you know, that's like subconscious, like, advertisement, subconscious, what word is it? Desensitization. You know, you're not realizing that you're becoming desensitized to these things because they're on the side. You're not paying attention to those. They're just little advertisements. I'm here to play this game. But it's still there. You're still consuming it to some degree. So that can cause some sort of subconscious desensitization as well. So there's a lot of that stuff in movies. There's the whole tinfoil hat thing about Disney, how in, like, Disney movies, like, it being racist in certain aspects, or them hiding subliminal messages in, like, the things that they drew and whatnot. There's a lot of stuff of that out there. More tinfoil hat ideas for you.
I mean, just facts. You're spitting facts.
Well, yeah. Yeah. But a lot of people are like, no, Disney, they would never do that.
Yes, I would.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of subliminal messaging out there. That's why I like that new, like Christ-centered, what am I trying
Angel
to say?
Studios?
Yes. Angel Studios, like production films are coming out that are like, these people they're not going to subliminally message you in any sort of inappropriate manner. You can see that this message is exactly what this message is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Daily Wire is coming out with, like, kid shows and other TV shows that are just about
I've seen some.
Yeah, there's just like the story.
Yeah.
Because stories are really interesting, but then when you try to add stuff into it, I mean, I'm sure everyone's realized over the last handful of years that there's always a some sort of like gay character in some kind of way.
Yeah.
They're changing. Wow, I'm really deep into it. I don't know what I drink today, but this coffee's really getting me conspiracy theory wise. They're changing genders or races of people to try to do stuff to.
It's not even a conspiracy theory.
No, that's what I'm saying. This hat's just a crown.
Yeah.
But it's really true, and I think as Catholics, I think what we're doing in this podcast, we've been calling this stuff out, and we're also being the antithesis of it. Is we're just calling stuff out, and we need to keep doing that as Catholics. Keep calling it out, and also just not consuming it.
Yeah.
Doing our best not to consume it, because it's really easy. Because we're on social media, we're posting stuff, we're looking at stuff all the time, and not following certain accounts that push it, not engaging with it, and when you're having conversations about it, standing up for your faith. You don't need to bombard people and say, "Oh, you watched The Hangover, you're going to hell now."
Yeah.
But
that's
just
extreme.
Yeah, it's calling it out. It's like, yeah, but there's this, and then like I said, just not consuming it to the best of your ability.
Yeah,
that's where VidAngel. I don't know if you've heard of VidAngel before.
No.
I wish we were sponsored. VidAngel is fantastic because what it is a software that it's an app you can put on your TV, and say you want to watch The Hangover. It has a bunch of filters. You can filter out every bad word, every bad scene, everything. So as a Catholic, you can go and watch whatever movie that they have in there, and it takes out all the bad messages. So you just get the actual comedy. You get the more human aspects of it, and you can protect yourselves.
That'd be an interesting conversation. Like, you've only watched movies with that filter.
With VidAngel,
you go to have a conversation with somebody who watched it.
Like,
yeah, this was a great movie. I saw this and this and they were like, we watched two definitely completely different movies.
Yeah.
But
watch the Wolf of Wall Street with it on.
Yeah.
No, you do that movie. So it shows you like two different timelines. It shows you the actual timeline.
Yeah.
So it's a full blue bar, and then it's the other one's just like bits of what you see and what you hear.
Yeah.
It's like
you get two scenes out of the whole movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Disclaimer, probably a good disclaimer. Having this conversation and people's perception on these kind of conversations, it needs to be known that this isn't any sort of like hate on like people that have anything to do with any of those subjects, honestly and truly. And I know that's hard to perceive when we're kind of like, yeah, this stuff is wrong, but that doesn't mean we hate those people or anything like that. Some of my best friends and things like that, I know I'm pulling that card, which is like, people are like, you're racist. Like, no, I have black friends. Like, no, it's like I honestly have like good people that I adore and love that like participate in these things. And a lot of people think that because we are Catholic or Christian even, that like we hate people that are like that because we are of that. But in reality, that's very much the opposite of that, and we just recognize that it is not a good thing to participate in and stuff like that. Like, Jesus didn't go hang out with the people that were doing good because they weren't the ones that needed saving. He still loved and adored the people that needed saving, and he hung out with those people because they were the ones that needed the help. So there is no hate on anybody that has to do with any of that kind of stuff at all. I forget what his name is. His name is Cliff something. I don't know if you know.
Cliff Knightley?
Yeah. And he's having a conversation on campus, and they're like yelling at him. They're like, are you friends with like racists? And he's like, yes. And they're like, see, that's horrible. And he's like, no, because like if I am not friends with them and I don't like try to help them or let them see that what they're doing is like a bad thing, then they will just continue to be racist. So the idea is that I am with these people and I am being, and hopefully they will see by being and sometimes, preaching or talking if I have to have those conversations and to exist as who I am will hopefully sway them in a way that isn't sinful, So that's the purpose. There's no hate. There's no like avoid those people because they're sinful. We don't cast judgments. We aren't the type of people that be like, you're going to hell. Like, we don't make that judgment. I say this all the time, I'm sure, and it's unfortunate to say, I'm sure that there are Catholics that are going to hell and Protestants and people who are agnostic that could possibly go to heaven. We aren't the judge of that at all, and we don't do any sort of saving. So that's not what we're trying to say as a message at all. I just thought that would be good to push out there, having our tinfoil hat conversation,
100%,
or a crown conversation. So
because we're called to love, and we're called just to lead by example. But you call out evil where it is. I mean, Jesus did the same thing.
Yeah,
and he said he was with the sinners, than the lower people of society.
Yeah,
they but need
the help.
Yeah, 100%. You got to do everything. Use your best judgment and everything through prayer. Because like if you have the idea, it's like, okay, there was a priest that did this. Who was it? There's a priest or a saint. I just remember this. He would take money, pay for a prostitute. Yeah.
Child prostitute.
Something like that. Yeah, and just so they didn't have to like sin that night.
Yeah.
And we're not all called to do that.
That's something different, but yes.
Yeah, we're all not called to do that. And like working within the Holy Spirit and your boundaries, but we are called to be that example. And then you said to use words when necessary. Isn't there a misquote from somebody? It's like preach about the gospel, but then use words if necessary.
Yeah.
But
it's St. Paul, isn't it?
I think so.
Maybe, but either misquote or whatnot. That's a beautiful sentiment. I mean, having conversations with converts and hearing other people talk.
I'm sorry. It said John Paul II.
Yes.
Yeah, duh.
You had the Paul part.
Yeah, there's Paul.
Yeah. I was remembering something. I was like, wait, that wasn't Paul.
But it's a beautiful sentiment. Like, genuinely, we need to be leading by example. And that's one thing that I think Christians and Catholics can always do better. I'm not saying we're doing bad, but there's always room for improvement because I've talked about it before. Like, there's no such thing as like perfection. Perfection only is in heaven. So we're always striving to be better, and there's always room for improvement, which is beautiful. Because like there was always that joke, like men when you turn like 25, 26, like your brain's like fully developed, and it's like, this is all I get. Like
have you ever seen those memes where it's like men when they turn 26 and their frontal lobe just fully develops, and it's just the moment of like full realization?
Yeah. It's like
it was like, I got one more year there.
It doesn't happen. I promise you. But it's just,
I guess you're not 26.
Mentally, I guess not. Physically, like 30. But I'm very glad you did say that, because that is a big distinction that the people need to understand, and people get wrong about the Catholic Church a lot. Catholic Church has a really bad rep of like there's saying they're just judgmental Catholics saying people going to hell. It's like, yes, are there people that do say that? 100%. But that's not what the Catholics are called. That's not what the Catechism says. Not what we do. There's always people who are going to take steps in their own way. But that's not what.
Yeah. And I know that our adoring fans obviously take every single word that we have and proclaim it as the gospel. But we're not always right.
No, we're not. And that's one thing though I do love about.
Like 99% of the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
But I'm allowing for that.
Humbly
speaking. Yes, of course. Yeah.
But that's what I love about like the medium of a podcast is genuinely, because this is just really conversation that we're just recording.
Yeah.
But it leaves room for like there's air, and it's cool to see that, because then we can like look back on it and we can get better when people can see that. It's
someone can call you out on it.
Yeah, it's human. I got called out actually 2 weeks ago from one of the guys in the Exodus group about something that I said.
Really?
Yeah, that I didn't clarify. We talked about past and drinking, and I mentioned the stories, and it's one of those things. It's like it's assumed that it's not good, and I'm not praising it, but I didn't explicitly say it. And it's sometimes, especially on the internet, really easy to clip stuff and have sound bites of it. Like getting drunk is a sin. Now it's explicitly said. So podcast 35, everyone always reference.
He finally.
Yeah, now I'm clean.
Just have a podcast where you sit down and just mark off what a sin is, and just go, this is a sin, this is a sin.
When it comes to drinking, there's a great quote by St. Thomas Aquinas. We've used this before.
Oh, we
justify terrible things. But the quote goes, "We drink to hilarity, not insanity." That is I don't actually know if it's a real quote. I just remember my theology teacher, who was a Thomist. He almost became a Dominican. He just told me that was a quote. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use that for the rest of my life.
Bro, I use that. I put that in my notes and I sent it to my mom. She got upset at me. Yeah,
not insanity.
Good.
And it's like always where that level comes in.
Yeah. Pause.
Yeah.
Throw in here. Y'all seen that meme where this like a stick figure drawing?
Yeah.
You know, if you just
Yeah.
and the guy goes, you know, I have a very severe
Opportunity.
Drinking.
That's beautiful. Though.
That's amazing.
That's funny.
No, that's one of my favorite things.
You're good.
But that's where a lot of conversations. I love where this is going. So talking about just drunkenness and sin, and people will talk a lot. So we're in Ohio. They just passed. They legalized weed here.
Yeah.
And there's always conversations like, is it okay to do as like Catholics, as Christians? Are we able to do that? And because it's when you can't control the level of effects you have on yourself, that's when you are playing with it near occasion to sin. So, right? And so as Catholics and as Christians, we're always called to avoid near occasions to sin.
Yeah.
And so that's where anybody who, I don't know if anyone's struggling with that here that might listen to this, but if you are Christian or Catholic and you have the inkling of you want to do this, something that you struggle with, like George Janko talked about this. And it's one of those things, avoid that near occasion. If you have to question anything,
Yeah.
it's probably bad.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and that's humans, we love to rationalize.
Oh, yeah.
It's the easiest thing to do. It's really, really fun.
Yeah.
You can rationalize just about everything.
Yeah.
But if you're doing that, probably not something you should be doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I totally agree. I used to out myself. I used to be a pretty big pothead. Like I used to smoke pot a lot. Just became Catholic right after they make it legal. I'm just kidding. But so I quit. I haven't smoked pot in probably over a year at this point. So it's been a while. But it came to the point where I started to recognize that like when I am doing this, the things that I start to want to do or do after I've smoked are like obviously super sinful things at this point. Especially now that I like can look back at it and be like, oh yeah, this was bad. So yeah, like a lot of that stuff is like somebody in RCIA was talking about how like you do all these venial sins and then all of a sudden you commit a mortal sin. You know, so like it's the same thing. Like here I am smoking pot and then all of a sudden I'm being gluttonous or I watch porn or I do whatever, you know, and it just leads into these other things. And like I said, next thing you know, you're committing a mortal sin. And it's like, you know, so it's better to stop those things rather than make up an excuse for, oh, I can control it, or I can, if I just like don't smoke as much as I do in one sitting, then maybe I can avoid these things. And it's like, why even put yourself in the position to struggle with said things? Just quit it altogether. Did it feel good? Yeah, sure. But that doesn't, like, that's my flesh. You know, that's my flesh talking. That's not what I should be doing by any means. So I have not smoked in over a year at this point.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And it's awesome you mentioned like the little venial sins leading to a mortal sin. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also a cool thing if you focus on correcting those little sins. So your language, what you listen to, those little kind of things, those can help you fight those big sins.
Yeah.
Which is a really, really cool thing that I mean, a lot of men struggle with pornography addictions and drinking and smoking, and they feel like they just can't do anything.
Yeah.
It just comes down. It's really simple. Start small, fix on some small sins, and you can work up to those bigger sins. Because not everyone's gifted to be able to just go cold turkey on everything.
Yes.
You know, and
Almost no one.
almost no one.
That's why I got the zins.
Yeah, you have to find little ways to kind of like fight.
I mean, no one can just go to a gym and all of a sudden just bench 200.
No.
It's just not possible.
No, I've
It is-
tried.
It hurts.
I've tried.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing about being human. I mean, Gina's podcast talked about how that song from John Bellion, how it's called Human, and he mentioned, I don't know, do you listen to John Bellion at all? You should listen to the song when you enter home. So it's
the way you said that was so perfect.
What does he sing?
Everything.
Oh,
he's like a popular singer, but I wouldn't call him like not main. He had the one song that was mainstream.
You know, like all the people that listened to 21 Pilots back in 2016.
Yeah, fair.
So they graduated to John Bellion.
Yeah.
Okay. Does he sing about God? Is that
no?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But it's like there's a lot of really cool messages in it. But the song Human, it's talks about like
it's a country.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm telling you, it's like all the people that you think would have listened to like 21 Pilots, like it's that type of
music. But so he says, "I'm so sick of being human," and it talks about just how like he'll like go smoke. We won't go call his mom. So it's like he'll fail at things he shouldn't be failing at, and he couldn't succeed at things he should have been doing. And just acknowledging that is really, really cool. It's really that's where art can be really beautiful.
Yeah.
And he might not have meant it to be like that. He might have meant it to be like that. And that's really, really cool when you're able to kind of, that's where, like I said, you can really pick the different things apart and use it.
It's a universal image because what he's singing about is not necessarily Christian in the sense that he's not singing about very Christian themes that you would find in the Bible or something. Well, maybe to a certain extent, obviously he would. But, you know, he's not talking about Jesus.
Right.
But it's a universal theme enough to the point that you can see that and recognize something intrinsic within your own soul. Like, oh, I messed up. I need to do something to make this right.
Yeah. I mean, you sort of spoke on like the idea of what repentance is, right? So like to repent means to turn from something and towards God. So like if you have an urge to smoke, to overdrink, to watch porn, to whatever sin it is that you're having this urge against, you know, to turn from that and turn towards God. So whatever that might look like, that could be praying, going to church, adoration, tons of other things that you can do instead of that kind of stuff. But I guarantee you, if in that single moment you use that point where you have a second thought or a doubt and you just run with it in the other direction towards Christ, I guarantee you won't commit the sin. You know, there's been plenty of times where I was like, I really wish I could smoke right now. And I have a lot of buddies that it would be easy to get access to smoking right now. And I was like, no, I'm just gonna pray. You know, I'm just gonna read my Bible for a second. I'm just sit down and write something, you know, or draw something even, and then the urge goes away. It's the strongness, like how strong that urge is in that moment. It's not gonna last. You just have to outlast that single moment. But a lot of people, when that moment comes up, they just lose themselves and they're gone. I did also want to say, before we get way far ahead of it, like I was talking about how we should be doing certain things, you know, helping people, how we care about these people, you know, we love them and whatnot. Catholics or Christians or people out there that are condemning other people, you know, what's the Bible verse? Take the plank out of your own eye. Do not talk to people like that. We are not meant to talk like that. We are not meant to say that. We are not meant to approach people like that. If you are saying that kind of stuff, oh, you're going to hell, you're doing all this kind of stuff, you know, you've done too much, you can't be saved. I'm pretty sure Judas could have been saved.
Well, no one's other wrong possibility.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, don't condemn people. You're playing God at this point, and that is very against what we should be doing or what we're told to be doing. So take the plank out of your own eye. And there also is a limit to, you know, don't preach at everybody. We are, you know, told to preach the gospel, but like I said, like we talked about, there's a form of preaching silently, existing, you know. So that is a way to preach. There is the verbal form of preaching, but it talks about not giving your pearls to pigs in the Bible, or the moment when you should realize that you're not being accepted, so you dust the sand off your sandals and walk away. You know, so know when to not push it too far, and you know, also to realize in that singular moment when you are talking to that person the way that you're talking to that person, you may be the only instance that they will experience something that is Christ related. Do not be a bad misrepresentation of that and soil that and wreck that seed. You know, like if you have to lose the battle in that moment to have many more after that with that person, lose the battle. do not get so like, I'm going to win this conversation. I'm going to plow this person over. I'm going to, put my foot on top of them and, be bigger than. I think in the Bible it talks about I forget where it was, might have been the Gospels, but he talks about how when he goes to preach to these people, he puts himself lower than these people so that way he can meet them and they can hear him. Do not put yourself above others. Do not think you are better than others, the holier than thou. Don't even let somebody say that to you. Oftentimes too, I'm just going on a bunch of tangents right now, but like the holier than thou thing, be careful when that's said to you, right? It might not be that you are coming off holier than thou. That might be that person's recognition of their own sins, and they see that you are avoiding sin, so they put you on a pedestal above, even though you know that you are a sinner. You are the worst of the worst. We are the worst of the worst. We are sinners. We cannot be perfect. We are striving to be better, but we know we're sinners and we have faults. So we should never place ourselves as a holier than thou person. And sometimes it's good to recognize that, okay, I'm not presenting this in a manner that I am holier than thou. This person is being confronted in themselves that they are doing something bad. And so then they have to say that I am being something that I am not to justify their own actions, stuff like that. So it's a lot of balance. Balance is the key to life, by the way. I figured that out a while ago. Doesn't mean I know how to do it, but it's for sure the key. It's just life is ever changing, so balance is ever changing. But yeah, so those things should also be said on top of what we already said. I think that's important to say.
100%. I mean, even Jesus washed the feet of the apostles. Right? Literally God.
Yeah.
Got down and washed the feet. Literally God. And yeah, again, I'm glad you made those points because sometimes it's like stuff's really easy to get lost in translation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it hurts me sometimes seeing people have like full arguments with people. Mm-hmm. And it's like you're not helping like a lot of the things, and your attention may be really good.
Yeah.
That's
totally fine.
Yeah, but it's just like he's got to just it comes in a balance and take the plank out of your own eye before you try to worry about the dust in someone else's eye.
Yeah.
You don't know what else people are going through, and you don't know what they might have experienced or what God needs to be working in their lives. Mm-hmm. And like I love listening. Like I absolutely love listening. So when you get a conversation, talk to somebody, and they start to when you can use silence in a conversation to when they mention something, they're talking about something, and you're able to just let it sit, and then it gets kind of awkward and a little silent, and then they just continue to go, and they're just kind of getting unraveled by God.
Yeah,
and it's a beautiful thing because talk about all the time like we need silence to hear God. Was it the one reading? I think was it in Joshua with Samuel or in Eli? Not
Samuel?
Joshua.
Is it in Samuel?
It's in Samuel. It's 1 Samuel something. Where he only hears God when he's sleeping in silence. Mm-hmm. And social media, everything around us, you don't get silence.
It's loud.
Bananas on the wall. I can't hear anything.
It's too loud.
Exactly.
But that's why I like having conversations with like people who are converts. Mm-hmm. And because you really, and what my understanding of how to get people to even think about converting or even just converting to the faith is listening, being just an example. I mean, my wife's a convert. Mm-hmm. I never once asked her to come to church with me. Mm-hmm. I never asked her to become Catholic. Mm-hmm. These are all just things that just happened by just me just living out my faith. I didn't boast and text her, hey, good morning, I'm going to church, it's Sunday because I'm a great Catholic. I never did anything like that. She just knew I went to church, and she saw it just in action. I'm not saying I am the best, perfect example, because I am not. Mm-hmm. I am a sinner, and I'm struggling, and I'm doing my best to be a saint. That's my goal. But that example can speak volumes. I mean, look at Zach Taylor.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have him on the podcast. Yeah. Because he has a presence about him. Yeah. And he doesn't have to talk.
No. He's intelligent. And he's a convert as well. But his wife was Catholic. And it's the same. Your roles reversed, basically. His wife Rachel, I think she's a cradle Catholic, and they didn't like have arguments or debates, or she didn't like do all this kind of stuff. It came down to him being won over by the existence of her in that sort of essence, that form. She is I don't know how you would describe Rachel. She's incredible.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman, and very much like when you see her, she's a very goofy lady. That's what I like about her. She's very humble, very meek of heart. And I became Catholic, and I came over to her, and I told her how much of an inspiration she was for me. And she just she got all like bashful, and she's like, "Oh, I am but a little worm." And I was like, "Oh God, Rachel, like you have no idea the impact you had on me without trying to have an impact on me." And same with Zach, the way he's impacted me. He's the one that I contacted. It was like, how do I, learn about becoming Catholic or become Catholic? And he signed me up for RCIA. He's my sponsor. He's my godparent, So he's been with me every step of the way, even before I asked him about that. When I was going to the non-denominational church with Peyton, and I'd sit down with Zach, and I'd be like, so they said this. What do you guys think? And I'd compare data, and I would do my research, and I started to conclude that it was the truth. And I've had many conversations after that with him, even before going to the Protestant church. He would just bring it up in casual conversation, not in a way that felt like he was shoving Christ and Catholicism down my throat. It was just like he was just looking at the beauty of the world and describing it and talking about it in that way. Because he writes poetry, sometimes I think short stories. Don't quote me on that either. I know he writes poetry. He has published poetry. So we would get together, and so he could see the world in a different lens that I saw the world. Or maybe I would say he chose to represent it in a different way than I did. We could see it the same, but he would do it in words and I would do it in paint. Yeah. So he would just sit there and we would just talk about it. And, he slowly nurtured my want to become Catholic and know Christ more just off of his existence as a man. You see him as a man, and how he's like softly masculine. It's not like I'm a big, hard ass and I gotta like show you that I got muscles and I got this big old car and I'm just a big manly man and stuff like that. Like we have those moments in fun, sure. But like that's not what, those things didn't win me over to wanting to become a masculine Catholic man. It was more so the fact of like, oh, I see how he treats his wife. I see how he treats his children. I see how he treats his faith, how he recognizes his sins and his want to do better. And I didn't see them as sins at the time. He would explain them in a way that I recognized that they were just bad in general. Later, I realized like, oh, these things are sins, and so the recognition that can be a huge detachment for people. You call them a sin, and they look at it differently. But if it's just objectively a bad thing, it doesn't have to be labeled as a sin, but it is inherently a sin. Yeah. So to see that and to see him do this sort of self-reflection, this introspection on himself, and then become better and make a few steps back at time, and then we would have conversations and become better. And I was just like, I want that. I want what he has. I want to be able to do that. And that's like, okay, where does that come from? And that came from his, his Catholicism, his Catholic background.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think there's like a really cool distinction that you can make in line with that. If you look at history and you look at Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan, who arguably two of the greatest leaders of all time, at least two of the greatest generals, right? Military leaders, they conquered the world, right? As the world knew it at the time. They literally conquered the world. Yeah. What is lasting of their influence? Right. There's no unification between any of the areas that they conquered. Genghis Khan, you can obviously argue, like, Mongolia and China, like, a lot of these places still have the same people that were racist because of marriages that were going on and stuff like that. But what is the real unification that's there? And they conquered the world, right? Militarily. And you distinguish that with the cross and the crucifixion, where Jesus, what's the lasting impact of Jesus losing the battle, the physical battle of the cross, right? He dies.
Yeah.
He literally dies. What does that do? That literally unifies everyone.
Yeah.
I think that there's certainly something to be said about evangelization and losing a battle in a certain way, right? Like you're losing a battle, but you're winning the war.
Yeah.
Right. And it comes from a place of humility.
Yeah.
Right. You're completely destroying the pride within yourself to get all those small wins and stuff like that. But really what you're doing is you're just showing them like your patience, your humility, your love, right? You care about this person like, oh, I want you to win.
Yeah.
Right. And there's 100% there's something to be said about that. It's a cool distinction.
And also the way that it's framed nowadays. So like those things that you mentioned that we have to come down towards, or I guess for us would be rise up to, but a lot of people would label those things as not masculine features, feminine features, and as a man you shouldn't have feminine features like that. But in reality, once you look into how these things strengthen you and make you become a better man, those things become overtly the masculine features that you strive for, So it's really interesting to see that, like, how that perspective flipped on those types of ideals. At first I was like, oh, I can't cry, I can't show any emotions, I have to be, prideful in a sense, or cocky in a sense, overly confident in a sense, in many different ways, because I thought that that's what being a man was, or to show that of the outside world that I am a man, I have to have these things and I have to boast these things so the world knows I'm a man. But when I become humble and meek of heart and soft at times, all of a sudden I become more masculine. And to see Zach exude those features and see how he excels in his marriage, in his parenting, and in his friendships and his being as a whole, you're like, whoa, how come I'm doing all these other things and I don't get that? Like, how do I get that? Well, it's because I'm going about it the opposite way, the way that the world wants to make you believe that this is what you need. And to be of Christ is to not be of the world. And once you find that out and you go the opposite way, you're opened up to a whole different way of being, the way you talk to people, the way you present yourself. I used to walk around like I was the appropriate word, I was the crap. But, then I realized that it wasn't about that. People would be like, I didn't even want to talk to you or come up to talk to you because you felt intimidating. I don't want to feel intimidating, especially if I'm out here trying to preach the good word, or to like just approach me as a person and learn about me, and hopefully like what I exude seeps off onto you and plants the seed. I don't want to be recognized as unapproachable. I don't want to have these features that make me like that's a toxic masculinity, when in reality there is only masculinity. People that are toxically masculine are just men that are toxic, and there's no such thing as a toxic masculinity. But so it's
like saying that there's bad love.
Yeah like, no, that's just not love, dude. Sorry. But it's interesting to see that flip and that change. And once you recognize that, like, you desire it strongly, and that desire can end up changing your life when you see that kind of stuff. It's changed mine. Peyton, like I said, we just had our anniversary. It's been a year since we got together. And she's like, even within that year, you're a completely different person from the beginning of our thing. And it's because I pursued these things, because I saw that they were absolutely and objectively good. Not the world says they were good, but that's not the like objective truth about these things. These things aren't actually good. And once I figured out what the objective truth was, that's when I pursued those things, and I was transformed. I was changed, and for the better. And a lot of people are like, oh, now you're, because you have Christ, you're better and stuff like that. I was like, well, I'm not better than you, but I am a better form of me. Yes. So, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, you started living by something. I mean, you change.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can't be of the world and of Christ at the same time.
No.
And it's a really hard thing to kind of pull apart because we're so engulfed in the world and everything we do. I mean, I think we talk about subliminal messaging all the time, or just during this podcast.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to think, oh, I should be doing this. All these people go out on Friday nights. Oh, that's what I need to be doing.
Yeah.
Because that's the normal good thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, is it though?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear too. Like, you don't want the world to hate you. You know, that's a lot of people. You know, and I was having a conversation with my dad, and he was like, you know, expressing that he was worried that I was entering into a place of confrontation. And I was like, Pop, to become like Christian, to follow this path is inherently going to cause confrontation because I'm going against the world. And the world does not want me to go against it. And it's going to try everything. It's going to throw the kitchen sink at me to get me back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to try. And I will fail at times, sure. But, you know, there's a lot of grace and forgiveness due to Christ dying on the cross that I am able to now access in order to come back to the faith, you know. And so it's interesting. You know, it is something that is inherently going to cause some sort of confrontation. And the confrontation is almost desired in a sense because I don't see it as confrontation. I see it as a chance to, like, help these people. What does Christ say? Just know that the world hated me first.
Yep, I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, and I can take comfort in that. You know, if I get taken out by the world because I am Christ-like, I am simply meeting Christ sooner. You know, there is no bad end to that. I'm also just not willing to take the risk to live worldly and be that way, and then at the end be like, well, we'll see what happens. You know, I wanted to have confidence in knowing what happened. You know, and studying all the history and what Christ did and the proof of God. Although I don't need proof of God, it sure helps. And it's interesting too, if we're on the topic of proof of God, when you have conversations with people and you're like, what would it take for you to, like, believe? And I had conversations with a friend of mine, and I was like, if God appeared right in front of you and was like, I exist, I am Christ, I am the biblical God, I was like, would that be enough to convince you? And he was like, well, it could be a being that has power over my mind and my feelings. You know, it could be, you know, a plethora of other excuses that was like, so instantly in my mind, I don't remember what the quote is about the, like, the amount of evidence wouldn't matter to those type of people. You know, it doesn't matter how much we prove. It is just you choosing to not want to give up those things. You're so engrossed in the world that to sacrifice those things and give up those things, you think that is too much of a loss for you. You have no idea what you have to gain. And they are just focused on what they are losing. And it's like, it sucks sometimes to have that conversation and present that question and get that sort of, like, legitimate answer from somebody and be like, therefore I am not the person to help you see things. I cannot take those scales off your eyes.
Well, it's like those people, if they're looking to disprove something, they're going to find everything they possibly can to disprove that thing. That's where I think it was on an episode of Pints of Aquinas, they talked about if you are genuinely curious about the faith, about the Catholic Church, about just Christianity in general, just go read the Church Fathers and, like, the Bible. Yeah. With an open mind, how you would read any historical document. Yeah. Because, like I said, if you're looking for something, you will find whatever you're looking for.
Yeah, there's something out there for all of that. You know, read the Catechism, but, like, there's plenty of people that are, I know Peyton, she was really about the non-denominational church. She was very, like, on edge, very much for that church in the beginning. Before she became Catholic. So she started finding videos that would show that they out-explained, like, what Catholics were saying. I was like, that's because you are looking for that specific thing. But if you did your own research and weren't manipulated by these people's words, you would start to see otherwise. Look at the facts, not when somebody's talking to you, just the way they present their voice or they present the information, or if somebody's simply just more well-read than the other person about those particular things, they might be able to out-talk somebody. But when you compare this fact and this truth to this, what other people perceive as fact and truth, and this trumps that, then this must be the answer. And when you do that, that's when I started to come to the conclusion that it was Catholicism. I did my research. And that's what a lot of people want to do. Or I sat down with my buddy Kenny, and he wanted to talk to me about Christ, and he started naming all these things that he thought like Catholics or just Christians in general did or was the truth. And I said, take out your Bible and find me where that says that that's appropriate or that's okay or that was commanded of us or that's what we should do. And he's like, well, I can't. I was like, well, exactly. If you're going to want to question these things, you should learn about them in their fullness first, why they believe that, how they believe that, where they find that, and then compare that to the other information. And once you do that and you see that this out trumps this, you're like, oh, well, I was wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. I think there's something in the society of today that it's like nobody wants to be wrong, and like it's good to be wrong.
Yeah.
Like, how else are you going to evolve?
Yeah, this is a human thing. No one wants to ever admit failure, defeat, or say that they didn't know something.
Sounds like a sin. Pride.
Yeah. So almost like it's a big sin that might have been like one of the first.
Weird.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like things are like I love when you said that like what God wants is simple. Like what He asks of us is simple, but it's not. Doesn't mean it's easy.
Yes.
Doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah.
But it is. It is. It's not. He literally gave us a book.
I caught my mom with that the other day. Her saying is, keep it simple, stupid. And I was like, sure, Mom, that is good, but you're missing the other half of simplicity. Just because it is simple does not mean it is not hard. You know, if there was a waterfall, a raging waterfall, and there was a rope that went straight down the middle of the waterfall, and the fastest path, the simplest path to get up the waterfall is to grab the rope, and either go down it or climb up that rope, to get to the top of that waterfall. Or you could take the super complicated route and eventually get up to the top of that waterfall. Just because that is the simple path does not make that path the easier path. So it's like, and that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm against a waterfall when you're against the world. When you're going the other way with everybody, you're just flowing on this giant path. And then when you're going the opposite way, you're against the waves. You're against all of that, and it's just crashing down upon you. But thankfully, we are gifted with many ways to combat such warfare in order to shield ourselves from such pressure, which is beautiful. And I blows my mind that a lot of people, Protestants and things like that, like outright deny those things. It's interesting. And like it also, like while we're talking about like just do your research on a thing that you want to bash, when they're like, oh, you worship Mary and you like do idolatry and you worship the saints and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you could pick up the Catechism, which is the ultimate book of what the Catholics believe. And I guarantee you will not find those two things or most of the things that you guys proclaim we are or do in the Catechism at all. And once you would do that, you would stop saying that because you would realize that we don't do that. And if there's Catholics that are saying that we do that, those Catholics are not educated in our beliefs somehow. I have to take a 7-month course in order to even become Catholic, in order to make sure that I know that this is what we do. And that's why I want to become well catechized and become good at apologetics, because it's not because I want to prove people wrong. It's so when people come at me with false information, I can back that up with absolute truth coming from the Catholic Church. We believe this, and this is what we believe, and I can show you where we believe this, and you cannot show me where we believe what you're saying. So it's a lot of interesting approaches. It seems, it's not lack of a better term, it's just ignorant approaches towards Catholics. Like, if you think we worship, or you're assuming based off of what you see us do, rather than knowing why or what we're doing, then you're judging a book by its cover. Take the plank out of your eye, remove the scales from your eye, read that, research that, ask the question. There's no Catholic that you're going to go up to and be like, why do you do that? And they'd be like, I don't want to talk about it. They'd be like, oh, we do this because of this. And it's simple to get that answer, but they refuse. They're like, I'm on my high horse over here, and I'm not getting down to ask that person a question.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
because to ask that question, it makes them vulnerable to being wrong, vulnerable to having to confront their whole lives.
And it's humble.
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're all human. We're always looking for small victories.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times on both sides of the argument between Catholics and Protestants, you always have that mentality of you're looking for the gotcha, right? Like you're looking for that aha. Yeah. You don't know that. I don't either, but at least I know now that you don't know it, you can't defend your position.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's why as Catholics we're just called to just do our best to be well catechized, know and do our best to understand the faith.
We have to be careful.
Yes, to a certain extent. I think you just need to be humble enough to admit that you don't know something, but you also need to be wise enough to tell them, like, hey, just because I don't know it doesn't mean that there isn't an answer out there. And you should be well enough, you should know enough to be able to point them in a direction of, like, you might be able to find a better answer in this area.
Yeah.
You said the catechism.
Yeah.
Catholic answers.
I love Catholic answers. Whenever I have a conversation, too, I always try to shoot a disclaimer at the beginning. Like, I'm not a historian. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a theologian. If we have this conversation, just know that I am not the person to have this conversation with. And you can question me, and I might not have the answer to that. But like you said, that does not mean there is no answer for that. It just means that I don't know the answer.
Or that I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Right. I don't have a perfect memory.
Yeah, and it's good that you asked me that question. I can either refresh myself or learn something new about my own faith. So it's good to have that. But there also needs to be a balance. I have to humble myself and catch myself every once in a while, because it's like, I'm in this hot pursuit after information and ways to defend myself and the apologetics, right? But I believe it's when Christ is talking to the woman at the well, and he talks about how you need to have spirit and truth. And a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm seeking only truth at this point, just so I can have the conversation and know how to defend myself. So, and when you look at Protestants, because I'm Catholic, I would claim that they have a lack of truth. That doesn't mean that they don't have partial truth, but it's not the fullness of the faith, therefore not the full truth. But like, I need to be making sure that I am full of spirit and truth, so I need to have that zeal for the Lord. I need to make sure I am practicing, I am doing what I am commanded to do, what we are commanded to do. And I need to make sure, my grandfather was a police officer. I need to make sure that I have no ignorance of the law, because what he says, like, when he would pull people over and they were like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't, know that was something that was the law. And he would say, ignorance is no excuse of the law. So that came from a conversation I was having with my father, I believe. And we were debating back and forth, heated debate about, like, well, how, like, some people are going to hell because they don't have access to the Bible and stuff like that, or this sort of information or whatever. And I was like, well, that's culpability. But if you're somebody who has access to the internet, the early church fathers' readings, the Bible, and you don't do what Christ says when you have access to all those things, or you are choosing ignorance. Therefore, when you get up there and you're like, well, I just didn't know. And it's like, ignorance is no excuse of the law.
There's a big difference and distinction between having an ignorant conscience and a malformed conscience.
Right.
I mean, a malformed conscience would literally not know what to do.
Yeah.
But an ignorant conscience would be someone who's like, for the most part, when people say, like, oh, I didn't know that was the law or something like that, I mean, most law is built on common sense, right? So it's like, if you don't really know the law, it's more of like, I mean, you kind of did.
Yeah.
Sort of, like, in most cases. Yeah. No, I will obviously, I'm not going to make the whole generalization, obviously.
Right.
To a certain degree. You understand my point.
Yeah. Like, people are choosing ignorance, or people are choosing hell, like that's crazy that you would choose that. But, you know, you are choosing that. And that is like an ignorant choice, is a misinformed choice. When you have the ability to read up on these things, you're like, oh, it's not for me. It's like, well, did you check it out? I was like, well, no. I was like, does your internet work? They're like, yeah. How's your phone doing? It's fine. I was like, you have extra time? You know, I mean, like, yeah. Well, why not? Check it out. What's it going to do? What's the harm in it? I don't know. I just don't want to. It's not for me. I was like, well, you don't even know if it's for you or not.
Yeah. It's like that term, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. And they're choosing that. And
yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's way easier to not have to follow a set of rules and be a good person and do whatever you want. Or, you know what I mean? Like, we're not going to argue that it is. It comes back to what we said. It's simple, not easy.
Right.
But this has been fantastic.
Oh, good. I was hoping so.
Yeah. I genuinely, I love this conversation. We'll definitely continue to have you on. If you can keep performing at this level, we'll get you back.
I'll try.
Yeah. As we wrap up, we always like our guests to leave something. Last time you talked about like your research.
Yeah.
Now, as you are
right on
Catholic,
this camera.
you will be on this camera here in a second, but this is your time to shine. Brian, camera.
Hit the thing.
There's a lot of pressure right now. Well, one, I would like to reinforce the doing your own research. You should always do your own research. Don't hear something and be like, that's true. You know, make sure you have an informed conscience. Do not choose ignorance. Do not choose something that you just hear. Like I said, ignorance is no excuse of the law. And love people. Truly love people. All people. It doesn't matter what walks of life they have. It doesn't matter what sin that they choose. Everybody is deserving of love. And, you know, you might be that person's only exposure to love. You might be that person's only exposure to Christ. Make sure you represent that well. Make sure you represent it intelligently and full of that love and that zeal for Christ. And just don't be ignorant. There.
Fantastic. And thank you, Symon, for coming on. And this has been the Just Like You and Me podcast. We're out.